He demanded audacity. But what if competent was the weapon he truly feared? Watch how a burned-out employee finally snaps back. 3 years of relentless overtime felt like a slow, agonizing erosion. But that's when the vengeance started. The coffee was always too hot, scalding my tongue the instant it touched my lips. But I never complained. Complaining felt like an admission of weakness, a tiny, pathetic flutter of a bird in a gale-force wind. My boss, Mark, thrived on weakness. He inhaled it, digested it, and used it to fuel his relentless, utterly self-centered energy. Our office was a monument to his productivity obsession. Gleaming glass walls, ergonomic chairs that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and a constant, low thrum of urgency that seemed to emanate directly from Mark's perfectly knotted tie. He didn't manage tasks, he managed effort. He didn't want things done. He wanted them done his way, under his personal, perpetually stressed gaze. From the moment I started, 3 years ago, the rules were clear, unspoken but gospel. The 9 to 5 was a suggestion, like a light suggestion. The deadline was a guideline, like a polite suggestion. And the expectation? The expectation was that you would operate in a permanent state of mild, productive panic. Always one step ahead. Always ready for the next impossible pivot. My job was digital content strategy, which sounds glamorous on paper. In reality, it was glorified, high-stakes digital dictatorial work. I was the one catching the errors in his slick presentations, the one rewriting the jargon-laden emails until they sounded like actual human communication, the one fielding the panicked calls at 7 p.m. about a server hiccup, and the one, most humiliatingly, compiling the weekly report that summarized his brilliance. Mark didn't just want the work done. He wanted the evidence of him doing the work. He needed to see the late-night Slack messages, the weekend email blasts, the frantic revisions made at 10 p.m. It wasn't about the output. It was about the input, the sheer, visible caloric expenditure of his own magnificent self. The early months were a strange kind of high. It felt like being part of an elite machine, a highly polished cog in a giant, expensive engine. I felt competent. I felt valued, if only in the transactional sense. I felt necessary. But then, the intensity ratcheted up. It stopped being high and started becoming unsustainable. It became the grinding friction of metal on bone. It started with the mandatory deep dive strategy sessions that ran until 8:30, followed by the quick alignment check-ins at 8:45 p.m., which invariably dissolved into a 30-minute brainstorming session about whether the company mascot should wear a beanie. Then came the expectation that these sessions would happen 3 nights a week, without fail. My personal life began to atrophy like a neglected houseplant. Dinner became a rushed affair eaten over a keyboard while simultaneously trying to read industry news. Socializing devolved into obligatory, exhausted nods at the water cooler. Sleep became a negotiation, a brief window between the exhaustion of the day and the looming dread of the next. Mark, bless his tightly wound, hyper-caffeinated soul, seemed impervious. He'd stride past my desk, phone pressed to his ear, talking rapidly about synergistic bandwidth while simultaneously sipping a green smoothie that probably contained more complex nutrients than my entire lunch. He'd see my dark circles, the slight tremor in my hand when I reached for the mouse, and his response was never sympathy. It was always, "Are you okay? You look a little under-optimized." Under-optimized. That was his vocabulary for human frailty. It implied a hardware failure, a lack of necessary software updates. He treated my fatigue not as a signal, but as a bug to be ruthlessly patched. The escalation peaked around the Q3 launch. Everything was thrown at us. 3 new product lines, a massive PR push, a sudden, unexpected merger that required immediate rebranding, and Mark deciding, out of sheer creative impulse, that we needed an entirely new mission statement that would vibrate with disruptive possibility. The hours bled into a continuous, viscous smear. Sleep was a luxury item, and I was running on fumes, adrenaline, and the sheer, stubborn refusal to admit defeat to a man who treated rest like a moral failing. I remember one Tuesday. It was dark outside, the city lights blurring through the window like spilled glitter. My monitor glowed, casting a sickly blue sheen onto my face. I was editing the final draft of the partnership announcement, a document that had been in flux for 3 weeks. My brain felt like static. Every word felt heavy, dense, resisting comprehension. Mark walked past my cubicle at 11:47 p.m. He wasn't on the phone. He was just there, leaning slightly, radiating competence. "How are we looking, Sarah?" he asked, not bothering to look at the screen, but knowing the answer already. "Almost done, Mark. Just finalizing the stakeholder bullet points." He sighed A dramatic, world-weary sound that suggested the entire success of the company rested on the neat placement of those bullets. Push it through. But wait, let's run a sentiment analysis on the introductory paragraph. Does it feel audacious enough? Or is it merely competent? Competent. That was the death sentence. In Mark's universe, competence was merely the baseline requirement, the entry-level skill. You had to be audacious, disruptive, visionary, or, worst of all, merely competent. I stared at the screen. Competent. I was tired of competence. I was sick of being the reliable, tireless, invisible engine that kept his magnificent, perpetually over-caffeinated facade running. The turning point wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a slow, corrosive melt. It was the moment I stopped feeling the burn and started feeling the numbness. It was the Tuesday night when I realized I could look at the glowing words on my screen and feel absolutely nothing. No pride. No anxiety, no even mild resentment, just a vast, empty plateau of pure exhaustion. I leaned back, rubbing the bridge of my nose until it smarted. "Mark," I said, my voice sounding startlingly flat, like a recording played through a low-quality speaker. "It's competent." He actually paused. His hand, mid-gesture, froze. His perfectly sculpted eyebrow rose perhaps a millimeter. "Merely competent?" he echoed, the tone dripping with profound offense. "Yes," I confirmed, feeling a strange, thrilling surge of defiance bubble up from the pit of my stomach. "It is perfectly, thoroughly, efficiently competent. It meets all the established KPIs. It sounds like a human being wrote it, which, in the current climate, is a bonus." He sputtered, searching for the right, aggressive counter-argument. "But where's the saying? Where is the palpable sense of market dominance? We need to suggest this partnership isn't just a nice addition, Sarah. We need to suggest it's a necessity." "It is a necessity, Mark," I countered, leaning forward, finally meeting his gaze with the flat, unblinking stare of someone who hasn't slept properly in 5 days. "It's a necessary function of a viable business model. It requires no extra creative flourish to justify its existence. It just is." The silence that followed was thick, charged with his indignation. He looked at me as if I had just suggested the sky was merely blue instead of a magnificent, disruptive cerulean canvas. "Well," he finally ground out, running a hand over his already slicked back hair, "you're going to make me rewrite the opening paragraph." "Of course," I said, already typing. But this time, there was a different quality to the movement of my fingers. It wasn't compliance, it was tactical engagement. For the next 2 weeks, I let him have his way. I rewrote the paragraph, then the subtitle, then the supporting graphics. He demanded bolder fonts. He insisted on changing robust to galvanizing. He wanted the entire document to scream, "Look at us, we're untouchable." I did it all. I poured my final reserves of energy, my last dregs of personal will, into polishing his polished, pretentious vision. I was the perfect, willing slave. But while I was editing, while I was optimizing, while I was crafting the perfect, aggressively worded call to action, I wasn't just fixing his work. I was building my own. I was building the perfect, automated cage for him. I started small. The weekly report, the one he demanded, be a sprawling tapestry of his accomplishments. I didn't just compile data anymore. I built a dynamic dashboard. Instead of static charts, the data flowed, updating in real time from our CRM. Instead of bullet points, I used interactive infographics that highlighted his wins in blinding, celebratory colors. And the mission statement, the one he insisted needed to vibrate, it now had a little embedded gif of a stylized, slightly manic-looking lightning bolt. Then came the emails, the endless stream of status updates, the requests for quick feedback, the late-night nudges. I wrote a simple macro script, a small, elegant piece of code that could read the subject line, parse the body, determine the required action, and draft a perfectly tailored response based on preloaded templates. If he asked, "What's the status on the Q3 pivot?" the bot wouldn't just say, "In progress." It would say, "Q3 pivot, 88% completion, projected delivery by 4 p.m. EST. Key dependencies, legal sign-off pending. Sentiment score, highly optimistic 8.4/10. The next level was the meeting scheduler. Mark hated scheduling. He'd send 3 emails asking for availability, wait 3 days, then send a fourth, slightly more desperate email asking if I could just squeeze it in. I built an AI integration that analyzed his calendar, cross-referenced it with my bandwidth, and proposed 3 optimal times, complete with a 1-sentence justification for each slot. The final, masterful stroke was the Audacity Check. This was his pet peeve, the thing he obsessed over. I coded a small function into the final presentation deck that, when he clicked a hidden button on the title slide, would run a rapid analysis of the text. It didn't just check grammar, it scored the language against a proprietary lexicon of Mark's approval, assigning a numerical Audacity rating. If it fell below 7.5, it flashed a bright, judgmental red banner across the screen, accompanied by a tiny, synthesized voice clip of Mark himself saying, "Merely competent." The day of the final presentation arrived. The Q4 launch was upon us, a massive, company-defining event. Mark, naturally, was running on fumes, his tie slightly askew, his energy vibrating at a dangerous, almost frantic frequency. He was pacing in the conference room, reviewing the deck on the massive screen, muttering about the need for more disruptive sparkle. "Sarah," he barked, running a hand through his hair again. "The executive summary. It's good. Very good. But the tone lacks the necessary predatory confidence. It feels cooperative." My heart thumped. This was at the moment he would demand a full rewrite, a 12-hour sprint to inject more unwarranted bravado into the introductory slide. "I think," I said calmly, "it's perfectly calibrated for the target demographic, Mark. It's aggressive without being alienating." He waved a dismissive hand. No, it's polite aggression. We need visceral, unapologetic dominance." Click the Audacity Check, sir. Let's see how far off we are. I clicked the hidden button. The screen flashed. The score appeared. 8.1. Mark leaned in, squinting. "Unacceptable. We need 9.0 or higher. Go back and inject more verbs of conquest. Make them fight for the partnership, Sarah. Don't just suggest it." "Right," I said, my internal gears whirring, a silent, glorious symphony of digital revenge. Verbs of conquest. Let's make it roar. I tapped the keyboard, starting the rewrite. We went through the process, replacing engage with assault, partner with conqueror, streamline with obliterate. Finally, I hit the final key. The score flashed. 9.2. Mark let out a sharp, satisfied inhale. "There. Now that has a spine. That has teeth. That has the necessary, beautiful arrogance." You waited, basking in the glow of his own perceived genius. "Sarah, you're a miracle worker. You saved this presentation from mediocrity." He turned, ready to launch into his triumphant recap of how his vision guided my tireless execution. "Now," he started, "about the follow-up materials. I need the entire Q4 strategic summary emailed to the board by 5 p.m. And can you make sure the introductory slide of the next deck has the Apex Vision tag really bolded? And while you're at it, could you pull the competitor analysis from the Western region and overlay it with our current market penetration data? Make it visually arresting, sir. Make it bleed." He paused, looking at me, finally allowing a sliver of genuine, exhausted relief to cross his face. "And don't forget to use the galvanizing font for the main headers." "Of course, Mark," I replied, my voice perfectly modulated, perfectly cheerful, perfectly robotic. He started to walk away, already mentally drafting his celebratory toast. And as he reached the door frame, he stopped, turned back, and looked at the screen one last time, admiring his creation. "Oh, and Sarah?" "Yes, Mark. Did you run the sentiment analysis on the executive summary?" "Yes, Mark. Score 9.2. He nodded, satisfied. "Perfect. Now, please send it." I didn't move. I just watched him, this monument to relentless self-importance, waiting for the final, glorious cue. Then, with a smooth, almost imperceptible flourish of my mouse, I clicked the final hidden command. The screen didn't just send the document. It did more. The 9.2 score didn't just flash. It expanded, growing until it dominated the entire screen, framed by the lightning bolt GIF, pulsating gently. And underneath the score, the small, synthesized voice clip of Mark himself. His own voice, the voice that demanded audacity and competence and unrelenting effort, spoke. Not a word of praise, but a single, devastating pronouncement. "Merely competent." The sound echoed in the silent conference room, a perfect, tiny, digital clap of thunder. Mark froze mid-stride. His jaw actually dropped. He stared at the screen, at the number, at the GIF, at the mocking, perfect articulation of his own scorn. He looked from the screen, to the perfectly composed, utterly serene face of Sarah, and back to the glowing, judgmental 9.2. He looked like a man whose entire carefully constructed operating system had just been breached by a single, perfectly written line of code. The silence stretched heavier and richer than any of his corporate jargon. He didn't shout. He didn't storm out. He just stood there, trapped by his own metrics, realizing that the system he worshipped, the system that demanded his infinite, exhausting output, was no longer an external force. The system, my sleek, beautiful, automated monster, was now running him. What? He managed, his voice a reedy squeak. It's not 10.0. I picked up my ergonomic mouse, feeling the familiar, comforting weight of it, but now it felt like a scepter. Mark, I said, and this time, the flatness in my voice was gone. It was resonant, deep, and utterly final. 10 is reserved for the mythical, unachievable ideal. But 9.2 is the quantifiable reality of your performance. It is the perfect, undeniable measure of your disruptive, utterly exhausting, self-obsessed brilliance. I pause, letting the digital verdict settle over him. And now, I've already scheduled the review meeting for next Monday, 8 o'clock am sharp. It is automatically booked, requires your full attendance, and the agenda is pre-populated. You do not need to approve it. You simply need to show up. The system will manage everything else. He stared at the screen one last time, seeing his own reflection in the glowing 9.2, a reflection that was suddenly, brutally quantify. He had tried to optimize me. He had tried to push me past the breaking point, but I hadn't broken. I had evolved, and in the quiet hum of the server, I watched the dashboard update. The little lightning bolt gif pulsing a steady, triumphant rhythm. The engine wasn't just running anymore. It was running flawlessly, efficiently, and entirely, gloriously, on my terms. He hadn't optimized me out of existence, though I had optimized him, and that, I thought, a slow, deep wave of pure, satisfying peace washed over me. Merely competent was the most beautiful thing anyone had ever said to me.